Second commandment, part of Lord's Day 34, and then we'll read Lord's Day 35's explanation of the second commandment. Thou shalt not make unto thee any graven image, or any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that is in the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. Thou shalt not bow down thyself to them, nor serve them. For I, the Lord thy God, am a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers upon the children, unto the third and fourth generation of them that hate me, and showing mercy unto thousands of them that love me, and keep my commandments. Then Lord's Day 35. What doth God require in the second commandment? That we in no wise represent God by images, nor worship him in any other way than he has commanded in his word. Are images then not at all to be made? God neither can nor may be represented by any means. But as to creatures, though they may be represented, yet God forbids to make or have any resemblance of them, either in order to worship them, or to serve God by them. But may not images be tolerated in the churches as books to the laity? No, for we must not pretend to be wiser than God, who will have his people taught, not by dumb images, but by the lively preaching of his word. Now, of all the 10 commandments, you could make a good case for the second commandment as being the one which is most ignored or avoided. Think, for instance, of the Roman Church. For obvious reasons, Rome does not like the second commandment. And so Rome subsumes the second commandment under the first commandment. And so the distinct point of the second commandment is lost. Not merely that we mustn't worship any other God but the true God, but that we must worship the true God the way he sets forth in his word. So they subsume the second under the first, and thus lose the point of the second commandment. And in order to make it back to the full number of 10, they then divide what we call the 10th commandment into two. So the 9th and the 10th commandments say, thou shalt not covet, X, Y, and Z, and thou shalt not covet A, B, and C. Within much of Protestantism, the second commandment is also probably the most ignored or avoided of the 10 commandments. Why? Well, the second commandment is that commandment which teaches the regulative principle, which teaches that God must be worshipped only as the word says, and if you don't have warrant for it, you don't do it. That is like a sharp knife which cuts through the nonsense and corruption which enters into the worship of the departing churches. As question and answer 96 puts it, what does God require in the second commandment? First, that we in no wise represent God by images, and second, that we don't worship him in any other way than he has commanded in the word. The first reason why it's neglected and avoided is the regulative principle. The second reason is that the second commandment contains the most terrible threat of all the 10 commandments. You mustn't do this. Any form of idolatry or images, you mustn't do this, because I'm a jealous God, and I take this commandment perhaps especially seriously, if you will pardon the expression. As a jealous God, I visit the iniquity upon your children, to the third and fourth generation of those who hate me. And those who hate me means those who corrupt my worship by bringing into it that which they have no warrant from Holy Scripture. Imagine that. God judging your children and your grandchildren and your great-grandchildren and your great-grandchildren because you corrupted the worship of the church. No wonder there's not much said about the second commandment when you bring in the drum kits and the young guys cavorting and the plays and the drama and the liturgical dance, and you say to them, you are cursing your children. That's what you're doing, and you think it's fun, and you think it brings in the young people. You think it keeps the teenagers in the church. Such blindness. And if you think too of the spirit of false unity and cooperation which rules in Christendom, the syncretism, no graven images, says the second commandment. Well, that's a no-no if you want to fraternize with those of pagan religions. So we don't want to hear anything about the second commandment. And then the false ecumenism amongst the professing Christians, well, forgetting every other doctrine in the Bible, if you just sit with this one doctrine, the regulative principle of worship, that you must worship God only as He commands, and if you don't, He will curse your children to the third and fourth generation, assuming they follow you and walk with you in these sins. Well, that's the end of your false ecumenism for a start before you get to any other doctrines. And so I say again, no wonder the second commandment is so widely ignored and avoided and hated. But that's not the way it must be with us, beloved. We don't ignore or avoid, never mind hate, the second commandment, because it's part of God's covenant word to us and our children. God's law, including this commandment, is a lamp unto our feet and a light unto our path. So we're going to hear it together. First, very simply, what it forbids, and then second, what it requires. No graven images. What is forbidden and what is required. God forbids us to worship graven images because, in short, He cannot be represented thereby. He forbids us to worship graven images, even purportedly of Himself, because He cannot be represented thereby. It is totally impossible because of who He is as the one true and living God. Are images not at all to be made? Asks question 97. God neither can nor may be represented by any means. God cannot be represented by any means. God cannot be represented by images because, by definition, the Almighty is spirit and invisible. He's not physical in any way. God isn't. Now, the second person of the Holy Trinity became man. But God and the second person of the Holy Trinity, He is not physical in any way. He took to Himself a real and complete and weakened human nature. But God is not physical. We can't see God. We can't touch God. We can't smell God or taste God, even in heaven, even after all eternity, by definition. Properly speaking, we cannot hear Him either. Properly speaking. Your ears can't hear supersonic sounds, and they're not designed to hear God either. How then can the Almighty be represented by an image, a picture, or a statue? It is physical. He is spirit. The image can be seen and touched, and that's the beauty of the image, and that's why the people like them, but God can't. Human beings may even, in some sense, be able to smell or taste an idol. In fact, in Exodus 32, you know where I'm going now, they even ate the idol when Moses, in fury, ground it into powder and made them eat it.